High Road starts like all great stories start, at a gorgeously detailed Nazi palace in the Arctic, styled in the French Gothic manner. Obviously, where else would a story start? Hanging off the side of the palace is a white man. His army uniform is torn, battered, and stained with blood. Bandages cover his forehead, they squeeze around his right knee. He is missing a boot, while the other boot's teeth bite into the ice wall. In his left hand is an ice pick, and it holds most of his body weight. At his belt, held in his other hand, is a ticking bomb. This is United States Army Sergeant Nicholas Highroad, and he is on a desperate mission. If he can get that bomb set in the next 30 seconds, then he can skedaddle out of there before any Nazi scum show up. Which is when a Nazi soldier cocks his gun. Just up and to the left of Highroad's position is a beautiful icy balcony, with a not-so-beautiful man standing on it. Nick stares at him blankly. Howdy? Don't suppose you and me can jaw this out all gentlemanlike, he asks. The Nazi answers with a spread of gunfire. None of the bullets hit, and the Nazi smiles. Hey! That was just mean! Nick shouts. You're smiling? You're enjoying this? The soldier puts down his machine gun and draws a small Luger pistol. Well, you're like a polecat playing with his food, ain't you? Well, if you spoke English, I'd be cursing a blue streak at you right about now. So I hope this works! Nick lashes out, kicking at the ice that supports the balcony that the soldier is on. The Nazi is confused by Nick's strange attack, and he's confused just long enough that the cracks begin to spread. Suddenly, the entire ice balcony collapses underneath him. The Nazi pauses, almost comically caught off guard for a moment. Gott in Himmel, he says. Nein! Nein! And then he plummets to the ground. Nick watches him fall. Oh, I reckon it's a lot more than 9 feet to the ground. Mr. Ratsy, when you get to hell, you can tell them United States Army Sergeant Nicholas Highroad sent ya. Gunfire interrupts the celebration. Bullets cause ice and snow to explode all around Highroad as a Nazi air patrol passes by. For being all the way up here at the top of the world, this sure is one well-guarded place, Highroad says. As he watches the plane turn around, circling, the American can't help but be a bit annoyed. Y'all are turning around? What, y'all want to play more cat and mouse games? Don't nobody just shoot anybody anymore? He starts to look around at what he has access to, praying to God for some kind of hope for a weapon, and he spots the Nazi soldier's abandoned machine gun, just barely hanging on the ice above him. Nick carefully bites into the wiring of the bomb, using his mouth as a free hand as he stretches, and the plane finishes its turn. He continues stretching, his gloved hand reaching out. The plane closes in. Hang on, one of the occupants says in German. Did he just... Jawohl, the pilot says. Nick twists, aiming his new machine gun at the rapidly approaching plane. I got a message for you from my Uncle Sam. Die, you ratsy bastards, die! He then opens fire, killing the men and sending the plane wildly off course. It crashes into a far part of the palace and explodes. Nick looks down at his hands. Well, he's got to be the luckiest man in the world. Still got both of his hands, both of his feet, all 10 of his fingers. The bomb is suddenly clutched safely to his chest. Wait a minute. If his hands are here, then what is he hanging on to? With the ice ledge all gone, Nicholas Highroad drops. Lord, he asks as he falls, how did I get myself into this mess? My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 30.1 of High Roads. You gotta be kidding me. Unlike Tailweaver, I have absolutely no memory of how I discovered Highroads. Originally released in 2002, it's definitely from that same era of comic book buying exploration that led me to books like Battle Chasers, Tailweaver, and so many more. How did I find this one particular series, though? I have no idea. In a nice bit of irony, though, the main reason that I bought this book because it actually has a creative team that I first read on a couple different X-Men comics. So while I may have started on X-Men comics, that same interest led me to many other books. Author Scott Lobdell is no stranger to this particular podcast. We've discussed his writing back on Fantastic Four Volume 3, where he wrote the opening 4.5 issues, maybe? Those books were a lot of fun, with a focus on the characters, their relationships, and remixing old enemies while still introducing new ones. Lobdell left the book with, I think it was technically issue 4, which he plotted, but then incoming author Chris Claremont scripted. When Lobdell left Fantastic Four, it would actually be his last writing job for Marvel, as he then moved into writing for movies and TV, for independent comics like Highroads, and eventually for DC Comics itself. In 2013, his career was brought to a pretty screeching halt, thanks to some pretty racist and sexist comments that he made at a comic convention. This has led to him having little to no social media presence, and it's a real shame for fans of his writing, like myself, to be so in love with some of the things he's created while knowing that he's maybe a bit of an insensitive person. Penciler Leinil Francis Yu is new to the show, though. I first saw his artwork on Wolverine issues 115 to 118 back in 1997, I want to say it was, as part of Wolverine's tie-in to the Operation Zero Tolerance event. And I wasn't a fan back then. I found his artwork to be incredibly rough and unfinished, with really thin line work and a focus on realism that I had not yet quite developed a taste for yet. Thankfully, my tastes had begun to change by the time Highroads was published, and Leinil Francis Yu's artwork has grown by leaps and bounds as well. And I'll tell you right now, this comic looks astounding. Part of the credit for that goes to the inking by Yu's longtime partner, Gerry Alanguilan, and is colored by, check this out if you listen to our Tailweaver episodes, Avalon Studios. Together, the 4 members of the creative team create one hell of a fun adventure, as you've now experienced with our opening scene. As with most of my returns to my older comics, I remember the overall plot of Highroads pretty well. The finer details of the book have skipped out on my mind, though, so I was really super delighted to open the book, and see such a detailed, well-rendered, lovely pic of our boy Nicholas Highroad hanging from the wall. And then we see that 2-page spread of the Nazi fortress. Just, oh my god, it's gorgeous. It looks so good. How can it look this good? The detail, the line work, the architectural awesomeness, my friends. It's like looking at a photograph, but like knowing that hands drew all of that detail. Oh, it's incredible looking. I remember, if I remember anything about Highroads, it's that I remember learning to love Yu's artwork on this particular book. But even in that case, I don't remember it looking this good. Wow. It's just impressive. It's just impressive. A part of the reason that it looks so good here in the beginning is because of our setting. Let's face it. The white of the Arctic means that Yu doesn't really have to draw a lot of complicated backgrounds. In fact, the only times we really get a background is for an establishing shot, or when we're looking down at Highroad from an angle. A lot of these opening pages are just white, or a slightly off-white coloring. But this allows you to focus on the faces, on the acting, and on the physicality and detail of the figures. We can tell, thanks to this detail, that Highroad is at the end of a long journey. His clothes are torn, he's battered and beaten, but he is also clearly not done yet. He's scaled this ice building with very little equipment. He's got a ticking time bomb with him just waiting to go off. This is a man on a mission, and long odds will not stop him. Not only do we have past evidence of that thanks to his wounds and clothing, but we also see his tenacity in this opening scene. We also have a very easy bad guy for storytelling, Nazis, who most Americans will agree are evil. Why is High Road attempting to plant a bomb on their ice palace? I mean, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because he's killing Nazis. This allows our author to focus all of our beginning on High Road and demonstrating that he is a likable person. While this book is most definitely an ensemble one, I would argue that High Road is very much our lead character in that ensemble. He is the audience stand-in, or at least he is the guy that we are meant to empathize with, and everybody else surrounds us by surrounding him. High Road does feel really simple here, like he's a bit of a cipher for the audience, which again reinforces the idea that we are meant to imprint ourselves onto him, as if this is our adventure. High Road is just funny enough, he's calm under pressure, but he isn't perfect either. He forgets that he needs to be holding on to something after he smashes that ice balcony, so he is fallible, he's human. That humor helps us, as readers, relax and helps set a very specific tone for the comic that is High Roads. This book might be about killing Nazis and stopping whatever plot they're up to, but it's also fun. We're channeling a little bit of that Indiana Jones energy, that adventure serial from the 1940s feel, and I absolutely love it. We do see a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor, though. The Nazis had two perfectly good chances to kill High Road, and they wasted both of them by being over-the-top bad guys. Lobdell even makes fun of his own story point, with Nicholas saying, "Don't anybody just shoot anybody anymore?" High Road asks, saved mostly by the author giving him some plot armor. Lobdell knows that this is a bit of gratuitous story work, but that's part of the fun in the reading. This isn't a dark, grim, serious book where the hero dies in the first 5 pages, or it's all about the horror of war. This is a fun adventure book, where the only way to save the world from ridiculously over-the-top bad guys is for the heroes to do ridiculously over-the-top actions, and we're supposed to have some fun with it, and I love it so far. The story then takes us back 48 hours to Paris. The streets are filled with people. Men, women, children, old, young, a mime, and a couple of soldiers from the United States. They're largely there to tell us that the war isn't quite over yet, but we are in its final days. Things are so relaxed that they all agree to find some good old-fashioned French hospitality. In the form of Madame Eugenia's, the hottest brothel in all of Paris. Before these 3 men move on, they realize that they're missing someone, their pal, Nicholas High Road. It's for the best, as far as they're concerned, that Puritan in a whorehouse? Well, come on. He's probably writing a letter home to his sweet old mom right now. After all, they don't come no more innocent than Sergeant Nick High Road. Hard cut to Sergeant High Road, all cleaned up and pressed in his army uniform as he stands outside of a theater. Plastered onto the brick of the wall are several posters featuring a round-faced, dour-looking man. The roles are all iconic: Juliet and Romeo, Napoleon II, Caesar. And High Road is starstruck. Sir Arthur Bombridge III. What a brilliant actor he must be. While it sure would be a real shame if I made it all the way back home to Wallow Point, Tennessee, and I had to tell my mama that I missed a real chance to see an honest-to-goodness Paris review. Nick buys a seat and heads inside. The story cuts back over to Madame Eugenia's. High Road's fellow soldiers have all arrived, and they are most eager to spend their own money. The madam promises them that she has all type of women that they desire, and she leads the way. In the back, we find a woman who would be very beautiful if it weren't for the dark streaks of mascara under her eyes, her heavy scowl, and the cigarette burn in her palm as she puts one out. She is tall, buxom, let's say. She's a little bit of thickness, with thick lips and nice blonde hair. She's dressed simply in a robe and stockings with a golden necklace around her neck. This is Sloane. She is a recent addition to the brothel and whines that 6 weeks ago she was sleeping with the most powerful man in the world. Meaning, yes, she was Hitler's mistress. And she complains that he sure did know how to treat a lady. The other women all whisper behind her back, "Are all American girls so insufferable?" Back at the theater, Nick's eyes are wide as the show starts up. There is almost no one else in the theater, by the way. The announcer does his job, the curtains part, and out step several German soldiers. Up top, at least. They are wearing heels and stockings from the waist down. In between them is a little person who is dressed as Hitler. This is Sir Arthur Bombridge III. "Hey," he says, "how the Sieg Heil are ya?" Nick claps. And he is the only one in the audience to do so. In fact, the elderly couple next to him looks at him like he is insane. Sir Arthur cues the music, and as he begins to sing, the soldiers start to kick up their legs. He is singing "I Want to Be Happy," originally written for a 1925 musical. The crowd, what little of a crowd there is, starts to laugh at the show, but Nick never does. After the show, Nick waits out back eagerly. "There isn't anyone else at the stage door," he says to himself, hopping with nervous energy. "Whew, what luck." Sir Arthur, now dressed in a suit with a coat, scarf, and hat, exits the theater and wishes him a good evening, and he tries to move on his way. Nick practically trips over his own tongue, complimenting the show and Sir Arthur's performance. You know, he was at Normandy, and he has been shot at more times than he cares to think of, but I tell you, he has never been as breathless as he was watching your performance tonight. You, sir, are a professional, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but I just wanted to tell you what an honor it was just to sit through your show. Sir Arthur quietly takes the praise in, and then he looks away from Nick. You've had your jollies. Now bugger off. And Nick says that he doesn't know how to bugger off, but if Arthur will show him, he will happily do it. This is why I like Nick. He is as honest as the day is long. He is as naive as all get out, but there isn't a trace of irony in him. None of this is meant to be mean. He is completely sincere. He legitimately loved Sir Arthur's show, and Sir Arthur clearly did not. The Englishman starts to walk through the streets, and Nick follows, not quite picking up on Bombridge's cranky attitude. You know, he just wants an autograph, and even offers to buy Sir Arthur a drink. Not that Nick is much of a drinker himself, but still, it would be his honor, sir. Bombridge now smiles to himself. Well, you know, if you're buying, then I know the perfect place. Have you ever heard of Madame Eugenia's? Nick cannot escape this place. Look, is it simple humor? Absolutely, but it works. Like, this is just well done humor to me. And before we move on to the next scene, jumping from rooftop to rooftop above our boys are what sure look like ninjas. Yeah. Were you expecting ninjas in a World War II comic? Because I sure wasn't the first time I read this. At Madame Eugenia's, we find the Madame confronting Sloane, telling her to knock it off with the Hitler thing. There isn't a man alive who can think of... I do not know... Oh, there is the French accent. Okay, haha. Telling her to knock it off with the Hitler thing. There isn't a man alive who can think about Hitler and sex at the same time. You're a beautiful young woman who needed a job. I took you in, and I don't want to throw you out. But if you keep this up, we will both be out in the streets. Now enough with being Hitler's mistress, we? Sloane picks up a bottle of champagne and pours herself another drink. We, she answers sadly. As she lifts the glass up to her lips, we look at her from below. The necklace she's wearing is a golden heart. Her mascara has continued to run from crying. Perched on the other side of the glass skylight above her are the ninjas that we saw earlier. He did love me, Sloane mutters. He did. The back half of this issue does a lot of work in the overall story of highroads. It introduces two more of our four main cast members, it introduces our MacGuffin for the story, and it begins to explain highroads' journey back to where we started the comic. But the thing that I like the most is how it builds on Nick Highroad as a person through comparison. When we meet Nick in his first scene, he really feels like a bit of a standard action hero, a bit of a cliche. He's facing impossible odds, he's making jokes and quips about the situation, but he is also okay with killing people. Hell, he practically celebrates shooting down the plane when it happens. But when we see him in this second half of the story, we really get to see how utterly naive Nick Highroad is by comparing him to everyone else around him. The three soldiers that we briefly meet all make fun of the French's contributions to the war, or the lack thereof, because they joke that the French barely fought at all. This is based upon the French government's surrender to Germany, but it does ignore the fact that many French citizens continue to fight on anyways, in spite of the government's surrender. While the nation of France might have surrendered, its population did not, something that many modern Americans, and apparently Americans even at the time, may have ignored. These men are portrayed as rude, inconsiderate, they are clearly horny, and I would argue they're a little bit classless as well. They even make fun of Highroad themselves, demonstrating that even amongst his peers, Nick Highroad stands out. He is everything honest, naive, and good about Americans. He actually reminds me a lot of Captain America, but maybe a little more cranked up, like even more perfect in terms of like being, I kind of want to call him a little bit of a doof. He's Captain America without the super soldier serum or the shield. Honestly, from an artistic perspective, if you compared Highroad to a Leinil Yu drawing of Steve Rogers outside of the mask, they probably look identical. Here, let's take a look. Yeah, look at that. Anyways, we then meet Sir Arthur Bonnebridge III, who is also bitter, cynical, and all too willing to take Highroad up on his offer of a free drink, and even take advantage of it by going to a brothel. I also love the choice of song that Bonnebridge sang on stage, but I'm going to explain why in issue 2, because we're going to get some more background on the man himself that helps explain why this song means something. The same can honestly be said for our third cast member, Sloane, who is a prostitute whose life has passed its peak, at least in her own eyes. She has gone from Adolf Hitler's favorite lady to just another prostitute in Paris. Compared to Bonnebridge and Sloane, Nicholas Highroad is a flipping saint. This contrast also creates an excellent bit of tension for comedic purposes. They won't just be an angry, bitter, sad cast, they're also great foils for Highroad's positivity, and they are what is largely going to be driving the plot. These two characters want something after all, and right now, Highroad doesn't really have that kind of want. I mean, he wanted to see a show before going home, and he got to see a show, right? He met Sir Arthur. Bonnebridge and Sloane are both characters who want better lives, and issue 2 is going to begin to show us why they want better lives. Artistically, Yu creates a crowded, detailed, lively depiction of Paris. When we first cut to the streets, we get a nice 2-page spread of all the chaos, and I love this shot. There is so much life here, there is so much detail, and so many varied peoples. Just scanning through the crowd, you can start to see stories playing out, and that is a cool detail that makes the world of Highroads feel more real. This plays out throughout the rest of the comic. Background characters help comment on or exaggerate what we are already seeing in the story, whether that's the other prostitutes complaining about Sloane's constant crying about her former lover, or the other audience members being weirded out by Highroad's enthusiasm at Bonnebridge's show. If all you're paying attention to is Sloane or Highroad in the foreground of the panels, then you're fine, you're going to get all the major story notes. But if you scan through the backgrounds and you take time to take those reactions in, then it adds so much more depth to the story that you're witnessing, and I love how well-rounded and experienced this is artistically. There is an odd shallowness, is kind of the best way I can describe it, to the coloring of the comic. Everything looks very lightly colored. There are no like heavy full tones here, short of like pure black for the occasional shadow. This felt fairly appropriate during the opening scene of the comic when we are at the Arctic, as the snow and ice would have reflected a bunch of sunlight anyways. It makes sense that things would have been washed out. But when we move to Paris, especially a night scene, you would expect heavier, more realistic colors with lots of shadows and highlights going on. But that doesn't happen at all. The depth of coloring remains exactly the same. This bit of artwork really only stood out to me because the coloring in Tailweaver had so much weight and heaviness to it that High Roads feels almost empty in comparison, but only in comparison. On its own, I do think that the coloring is very consistent, and I think that it pairs well with Yu's line work. It honestly really allows Yu's line work to shine because you're almost more focused on the inking than you are on the coloring. And Yu's faces are all varied and unique. There's a ton of detail going on, and there are nice bits of comedy sprinkled throughout, both intentionally the script and accidentally in the artwork. There's one German soldier who is performing with Bombridge, and he just does this sigh while he is high kicking, and that's great. And it immediately helps sell you on the idea that this is not a prestigious theater doing a prestigious show. This is a bunch of guys who needed some money, and they got roped into doing this because it's a job. And I just couldn't help but chuckle as I read over that. You've got Bombridge doing this huge performance show, and you've got this one guy just... yeah, duh. It's a living. Already, this single issue makes me think that High Roads would make an excellent movie. And I'm not someone who wants every comic book or every story in existence to be turned into a movie. The comics aren't movies. They don't have to be adapted. They shouldn't always be adapted. But I do think that High Roads is a perfect fit. It just has, like, movie vibes, right? Speaking of the movies, before we catch up with our cast over at Madame Eugenia's, issue 2 of High Roads flashes us back to Arthur Bombridge's illustrious time in Hollywood. We see a brief scene of him riding a horse in the black and white western Cowboy Already Rides the Plains of Danger. The horse that he's riding leaps over some debris and he falls from the saddle. The director says, "Cut!" And everyone swarms Bombridge, complimenting his acting, promising that this is going to be his 5th blockbuster in a row, and they love how much he does his own stunts. Why, it really looked like that horse threw him. Arthur sneers angrily, fighting to get onto his feet. That's because it did! Who the hell trained this goddamn...
No swearing.
...beast? He then goes on a rant that would make Christian Bale proud and storms off the set. Everyone who was just complimenting him mutters insults under their breath. Bombridge hunts down his agent, Maury, who has bad news. The studios won't budge on his contracts. They control the right to all of his public appearances, meaning that he can't even attend his own movie openings. The studios seem like they don't want the public to know that he is a little person, although that is not outright stated, and the studios pay him good money to keep that fact hidden. You are well compensated, just stay quiet. Bombridge is starting not to care, though. From his perspective, he is a huge star. And, maybe the other studios would love to get a big talent like him. He is an actor, for God's sake, not a question mark. Our leading man then returns to his estate, with its 30 rooms, 20 acres, and 3 swimming pools. It is a kingdom fit for a king, and he is the king of the Cowboy Artie movies. Despite all that, the estate feels more like a prison, he complains, while lounging in his gorgeous swimming pool. A blonde woman wearing a swimsuit says that it feels like that because Arthur is, quote, an ungrateful, arrogant, miserable human being, end quote. There's a depression going on. Thousands of people are out of work, and he has a great job entertaining those masses that pays incredibly well, she reminds him. He should appreciate what he has. Arthur frowns, though. All the more reason for the studios to bend to his will, then. He is the one putting behinds in the seats on opening night. He does smile as his friend walks closer. Speaking of behinds, he says. She giggles and climbs into the pool with him. At the edge of the swimming area, a paparazzi snaps a photo. And we hard cut to a newspaper exposing Arthur Bombridge's actual height. He lost everything, and Bombridge doesn't quite understand why. How could this happen to him? His former agent Maury explains it quite simply. You're an
no swearing
asshole. Maybe next time Arthur gets a chance to be at the top, he won't treat people so poorly. And then we return to the present. But before we catch up with Bombridge and High Road, let's pause a sec. When we first saw Bombridge doing the littlest dictator routine in issue 1, he sang the song, I Want to Be Happy. This is a clever choice by author Lobdell. The lyrics for the song tell the story of an ordinary man, quote, doing unto others as I'd like them to have done unto me, end quote. This ties in nicely with the scene that we just saw. Arthur Bombridge was a jerk to everyone around him. The other actors, the production crew, his agent. Bombridge was a jerk, and so no one helped defend him when the paparazzi drug him through the mud. He did not do unto others as he would like them to do unto him, and he paid for it. That dramatic irony now revealed, let's look at the one line from the song that Bombridge actually sings, quote, I want to be happy, but I won't be happy till I make you happy too, end quote. This feels like the perfect line for an actor. From the audience's perspective, the job of an actor is to thrill the audience, to sell them on whatever it is that they're performing. If the actor does their job right, then the audience is satisfied, and within that concept, the actor can find their own happiness. It's a cycle of happiness, isn't it? But then we have Bombridge. Cast down from his fame and riches, having lost it all performing joke comedy musicals in a Paris back alley. Does Bombridge want to be happy? Yeah, sure. But he won't be happy until he makes someone else happy. And then he does, in the form of our naive little leading man, Nicholas Highroad. That chance meeting and Highroad's appreciation for Bombridge's job well done will literally change Bombridge's life from here on out. That is all carefully done, but really perfect character work. Anyways, back to our boys in the story itself. They arrive at Madame Eugenia's and find that the door is blocked by something. Highroad does manage to push the door open, and he finds that it's dead bodies blocking it. The entire place is a charnel house, littered with the bodies of the dead. Nick spots the 3 guys from his unit that we met in issue 1, and he is horrified. Who could do something so horrible? Bombridge scowls. Nazis. Sloane screams for help, and Highroad races upstairs, leaving Bombridge behind. He climbs up to the roof, but finds it empty. Or at least it looks empty. It clearly isn't, because he is suddenly punched from several different directions. His lip is split. He is knocked onto his butt. Now firmly laid out, Highroad gets his first good look at his opponents. 4 muscular men dressed in black ninja costumes stand on the roof. They are all ripped, armed with shuriken and katanas. They also all have black swastikas tattooed on their faces. They're honestly a really mean-looking bunch of characters. They are Nazi ninjas. Which is either where you absolutely check out of this comic, or like me, you're even more interested than before. This is great. One of them has Sloane slung over his shoulder, and she is not impressed to see this single dude coming to her rescue. Please tell me that you have a whole battalion about to charge through that door right about now, she asks. Highroad assures her that he is all the help she needs. He reaches around behind his back, reaching for his guns, but they're gone. One of the ninjas grabbed his guns during their first attack. Man, you're fast, Nick mutters. I don't reckon I can convince you to settle this man to man. The ninja shoves both of the guns in Nick's face and then cocks them. Yeah, can't blame a fella for trying, Nick says. But then automatic fire peppers the ninja from behind. Bombridge has finally arrived, wielding a Tommy gun that Madame Eugenia kept in her parlor. These bastards must have killed everyone before they even had a chance to fight back, he says. Highroads stutters out a thank you and suggests that they return the favor. He dives for his guns as a shuriken jams the barrel of the Tommy gun. Scooping up the pistols, Nick shoves them in the face of the nearest ninja, who presses a knife to the side of Nick's face in return. Well, back home, we call this a Mexican standoff, Nick says. Oh, please, Sloane comments. He has a knife, you have a gun. A Mexican standoff is where two forces are equally matched, and these two are not. With that pointed out, Highroad shoots the ninja, popping his head. The remaining ninja who has Sloane takes off, leaving one to slow them down. Highroad goes after the girl, and Bombridge fights the last ninja. He slices at him with the shuriken Tommy gun combo unit, kicks the ninja in the knee, and then clobbers the man with the butt of the gun. This surprisingly ferocious assault knocks the ninja out and sends him crashing through the skylight of the brothel. Bombridge wipes at his face. Never mess with Cowboy Artie. As the remaining ninja escapes with Sloane, the woman berates him. Look here, Mr. Brotherhood of the Iron Cross, and yeah, I know all about your secret order bullcrap. Look, me and your boss were tight. We were like this. So when he hears about how you are treating me, he is going to be pissed. If Sloane wasn't enjoying being manhandled by the ninja, then she sure as hell doesn't enjoy when Nick tackles that ninja, slamming them all into and down the roof of the building they were on. They slide along and through the tiles, shattering many of them, but thankfully the ninja falls off of the roof into the Seine River first. Nick barely manages to catch the rooftop drain in one hand and Sloane with the other. The drain suddenly bends, dropping them a few more inches. Sloane starts screaming. Nick grimaces. This ain't helping much, ma'am. You are really not good with this whole rescuing thing, she shouts back. Just as they fall, a clothesline wraps itself around Nick's outstretched hand like a lasso. We follow it back to Sir Bombridge, who has tied it off around the building's chimney. I believe I still owe you an autograph, he says. In the wake of all this madness, the three retreat to the only safe place left to them, Bombridge's dressing room. They've all got coffee, smokes, and a comforting blanket for Sloane. Bombridge finally asks her what we've all been wondering. Hitler is kind of famously in love with Ava Braun, not some American woman named Sloane, and he clearly had an entire brothel of people killed in order to have her retrieved. So, what's the deal here? Sloane assures them that Dolph would never kill her. He loves her too much. But he sent the ninjas because he wants to know if she's told anyone about his greatest treasure. He's afraid that someone would use the chaos of the final days of the war to steal it out from under him. Bombridge lights his cigar, and he looks pretty thoughtful after hearing that. Nick just looks back and forth between them. Well, who would be crazy enough to even think about doing something like that, right? Sloane and Bombridge look exactly that crazy. Our first issue opened with an action scene and then settled into gentle character work. This issue flips that structure, opening with character work and then banging out some action. Lobdell does a great job of doing both, in my opinion. We can see little Cowboy Artie moments sprinkled throughout the action scene that makes up the majority of our second issue, and these are things that we wouldn't understand if it weren't for that earlier flashback scene. So that scene doesn't just explain Bombridge's background and why he is who he is, it also informs his fighting style, his quips, and his skill set. When he throws that clothesline as a lasso, that's because of Cowboy Artie. When he fights the ninja on the rooftop and manages to take him down, that's because of Cowboy Artie. That's great. Nick Highroad maintains a balance of naivete and capability throughout the scene. He reacts pretty instinctively to save Sloane. She calls for help, and he goes to help. He's a good guy. That's what he does. He doesn't back down when fighting the ninja, even when he is clearly outclassed and outnumbered by them. He chases after Sloane, and he risks his life to save her. But when he has the one ninja in a Mexican standoff, we really get to see his naivete at play again. And maybe if you're a little bit unkind, you could say it's his stupidity. It's almost like Nick kind of gets caught up in being the accidental action star of this movie, and then characters like Bombridge or Sloane are the ones who have to point out that life isn't a movie. That's not a Mexican standoff. You've got a gun, just shoot him. So he does. But to the end of realism, I do have a single real complaint about issue 2. And that's, if this story is meant to be realistic, then why do the ninjas just not outright kill Nick when they encounter him? They had him dead to rights when he exited onto the roof. They beat the absolute crap out of him, they took his guns, they just killed everyone else in the brothel. Like, they didn't knock them unconscious and leave them. They didn't kill who they had to and then left the rest alive. They killed everyone. They wanted no one to know that they were there. There is no reason for these ninjas to spare Nicholas Highroad outside of good old-fashioned drama and the necessity of Nick being alive to tell the story. And don't get me wrong, yeah, it is dramatic AF that they let him live, but it also doesn't really make sense that they let him live. Kind of like Nazi ninjas. Did the Nazis have ninja? No. Does it matter that they don't have ninja? Because it's cool? Correct. It doesn't matter that the Nazis didn't have ninja, because it's cool that the story has Nazi ninjas in it. You buy it because you want to buy it, because you're along for a rollicking good time. Does it make sense that the ninjas didn't kill Nick? No, it doesn't make sense. But you know what? It's more entertaining that they didn't kill Nick. And so you go along with it, and I'm kind of okay with that. The Brotherhood of the Iron Cross, the ninjas, look really cool as bad guys. Their black outfits and swastika look super evil and super badass. They also aren't all dressed the same, which is interesting because it gives each one of the ninjas a minor sense of individuality. They honestly have no personality and none of them say anything during this fight scene, but they are intimidating looking, and that's really all the story needs them to be. They are mindless bad guys. They are an extension of Hitler's will. And they do that job well. They're dangerous, they're threatening, and they look like it. Can't be upset about that. We then end on the mission, or the MacGuffin of this story. Sloane knows the location of Hitler's greatest treasure. Stealing it would certainly piss him off, and anything that Hitler doesn't like has to be a good thing. Yes, like on your morality scale, yeah? For Sloane, this can be a chance to get back at the man who ruined her life by shunning her. For Bombridge, it's a chance for fame and fortune once again. And for Nick, well, I mean, we don't really have a motivation for Nick yet. I guess we'll find out next issue, maybe, what keeps Nick around. We know that he sticks around. We've seen how some of this story ends at the beginning of issue 1, so it's just a question of why is he still around. And we'll get there. At this point, I'm sold enough in the adventure that I'm willing to live with the mystery of Nick's motivation until we get to the end. I'm confident that we're going to get an explanation for it. Overall, this was a super fun opening set of issues. They are not super deep, I will give you that. But not every comic needs to be super deep. Not everything needs to be an examination of what it means to be human and how we get through our lives. This is a fun action romp with a little bit of comedy mixed in, and it does all of those things incredibly well. Lobdell's script is lively and sarcastic, the cast feels distinct and incredibly interesting, and he is playing around with the storytelling to inform us of history, personality, and story elements. Just mwah, all around as far as the writing is concerned. Leinil Francis Yu's artwork is incredibly detailed. It is full of pointy, kinetic energy, and pointy is my favorite art style. Highroads, as far as I'm concerned, is off to a good start, and I'm just having a blast rereading this. This is kind of the feeling I wanted to have going into Tailweaver, that I walked out of Tailweaver going, wow, I didn't get this feeling. So it is very reassuring to be 2 issues into Highroads and already going like, woo, that was a lot of fun. Oh, I can't wait to talk about the next couple of issues. This has been a blast for me, getting right back into this one. Next week, we learn about Sloane's history with her Dolph and exactly what his greatest treasure is. There is a shootout on a train, more of the Brotherhood of the Iron Cross, and we meet our final cast member. in Comic Book Breakdown, episode 30.2 of High Roads. All aboard! Train ride to death! If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.